This is a Louie T Network exclusive.
Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome, you are in the lab room, of course. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me on this In the Lab Room Louie T Network exclusive college football series. And this is probably going to wrap this series up, but it's a question that I think begs asking because I've talked about Myles Garrett already and the impact that he could have. And is he possibly going to be the number one overall selection in 2017 if he decides to come out? Here's another guy that if he decides to come out and enter into the NFL draft in 2017, that could potentially be the number one selection. I'm talking about Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson. And the question that I have to pose here with Deshaun Watson is this guy a better pro prospect right now? And I know this is a little unfair, and I'm going to get into this in a second, but is he a better pro prospect right now than Marcus Mariota was entering the 2015 NFL Draft? Now, again, let's talk about this for a second because, again, this is an unfair comparison because the body of work of Deshaun Watson is not complete. He could go out and have a horrible season, somewhat similar to what Jameis Winston, and I don't even want to call that a horrible season. Again, that wasn't a horrible season. Let me go back and clean that up. That wasn't a horrible season that he put forth in 2014. It just paled in comparison to what he did in his freshman redshirt season when he lit it up, took his team to a national championship and went undefeated and didn't throw a whole bunch of interceptions. So what I'm trying to say is Deshaun Watson could go out in the 2016 season for Clemson, lead them to an 8-5 record and not play very well, not the way we've seen him play, especially last year where he took Clemson all the way to a national championship game. And of course, a tough loss to Alabama, but took them all the way there with just spectacular play throughout the entire season. So the question now begs, can he repeat what he did last year in his sophomore season? And more importantly, can he stay healthy while doing so? But it's a little unfair to compare the two because, again, the entire Deshaun Watson collegiate story has not fully been written. But that's what we do. We make comparisons that are unfair a lot of times, and I'm not here to act as if I'm so just that I'm not going to be involved in making some unfair comparisons. Sign me up. This is a fun discussion, and I want to have it. So, is Deshaun Watson, in your mind, a better pro prospect than Marcus Mariota was entering the 2015 NFL Draft? Let's go to the tail of the tape. I want to discuss these guys a little bit more and look a little bit deeper into this discussion and delve a little deeper. Let's look at the tail of the tape between the two quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota, for me, full body of work. He was basically the guy freshman, junior, sophomore season. So all 3 years, freshman, sophomore, junior season, he was the guy. It was unquestioned, and he stayed healthy for the majority of his collegiate career. 6'4", 215-pound quarterback, great size that Marcus Mariota possesses. Whereas you look at Deshaun Watson, 6'2", 210, not the greatest size in the world, but no one's going to beat him up for it. Again, he may not be done growing, but look, let's be real with ourselves. He's probably not going to grow anymore. He's probably done, but he could grow another inch or two. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but most likely he's going to be a 6'2", 215-pound or so quarterback when he does finally enter the NFL, whenever that may be, 2017, 2018, we'll see. The future will tell us that at some point, but he's dealt with injuries. Before we even get into the actual numbers and what they mean, he's been a guy that has been banged up, had a cracked collarbone last spring that kept him out of some spring practices, or 2 springs ago, not last year because he was out of spring practice last year with the torn ACL that he suffered at the end of the 2014 season, and he didn't play in the bowl game versus Oklahoma when Clemson drubbed Oklahoma in that game. So torn ACL, let's go ahead and add that to the list. And he broke his finger trying to brace a fall in the 2014 season, his freshman season. So cracked collarbone the spring of his freshman season. A broken hand in the freshman season cost him about 4 games or so, roughly. And then you had the torn ACL towards the end of the season. He actually played on that versus South Carolina and played magnificently, led Clemson to a big win there, and then sat out the Oklahoma game. So again, Deshaun Watson is tough. No one's questioning that, but he has an injury history. But good thing for him, he was clean in terms of health last year in his sophomore season, did not miss any action, and was the unquestioned leader of that Clemson football team. So that's good for him. Now let's jump into the numbers, looking at him and Marcus Mariota. Freshman season completion percentage for Deshaun Watson. And I'm going with the best numbers for these two guys throughout their careers. And again, a little unfair for Deshaun Watson. His body of work is not as extensive as Marcus Mariota. Mariota had 3 full years of playing at Oregon, whereas Watson, you could argue, really only had his sophomore season. The freshman season was there, but it was spotty because of the games missed. And he was not the unquestioned starter to start the season off as a freshman. Had some spot duties there that were very impressive, which ultimately led to him getting the job. But he was not able to hold on to it for the majority of the season because of injury. But nonetheless, you look at the completion percentage between these two, 67.9% for Deshaun Watson. His best season was his freshman year when he went 67.9, which is actually, it makes a lot of sense because you don't throw as many passes. Your completion percentage, if you're playing in a spread offense, you're going to complete a high number of completions. At least you should. And same with Marcus Mariota. Freshman year was his best year for completion percentage at 68.5. And again, a lot less attempts. You know, your coordinator usually tries to take a little bit of that pressure off of you. Don't want to give you too much early on in your collegiate career, so you're not going to throw it 350 times like you would in your junior season. If you're a guy that's been in the system, that is a seasoned veteran, and you're freshman, we're going to ask you to throw it 200 times. We're going to ask you to throw it 175 times. We're going to ask you to throw it 225 times. We're not going to ask you to throw it 350, 375, okay? So both of them had their best completion percentages in their freshman season. Again, Deshaun Watson has a chance to change that. You go to passing yards, and Deshaun Watson is just coming into his own now. 4,104 yards passing in his sophomore year last year when he took the Clemson Tigers all the way to the national championship game. Same for Marcus Mariota when he took the Oregon Ducks all the way to the national championship game. 4,454 yards. That was in his junior season when he took them to the national championship game. So Marcus Mariota, again, having more so a little bit more success there, as well as with the touchdown to interception ratio. Marcus Mariota never had a season where he threw more than 6 INTs in an entire season. 4 was normally his number. Had 2 seasons of just 4 interceptions. His junior season, 42 touchdowns, 4 INTs, which is absolutely ridiculous. Whereas Deshaun Watson last year in his sophomore year, 35 touchdowns, 13 INTs. Not bad, but it's not 42 and 4. That is for certain. Rush yards. This is where Deshaun Watson shines a little bit, and we're not calling him much more of an athlete than Mariota, because we know Mariota is a great athlete in his own right, but 1,105 rush yards. He's asked to run a little bit more is Deshaun Watson than Marcus Mariota ever was at Oregon. 770 was his best total as a junior. Rush yards per attempt, and I think this is the number that most people like to pay attention to when regarding rushing yards. For Mariota, 7.45 yards per tote as a sophomore, whereas in his sophomore year, Deshaun Watson, 5.34 yards per carry. So the average is a lot less. You're talking about over 2 yards less for Deshaun Watson, but they asked him to run it a little bit more. I think he's the more dynamic runner and athlete if you're talking about getting out of the pocket and creating with your legs. So I'd take Deshaun Watson there. But make no mistake about it, Marcus Mariota is a great athlete in his own right. Rushing touchdowns, 15 for Marcus Mariota in his junior season, 12 last year for Deshaun Watson in his sophomore campaign. Win-loss record, probably the most impactful stat. Look, you can have all the numbers you want. Are you winning ball games? Both of these guys have gotten it done, or at least Mariota did get it done at a high clip. And Deshaun Watson in the midst of getting it done at a high clip. He's 18-2 right now, 17-1 when he starts and finishes the game. So he has a loss credited to his account that he actually did not complete the game for. Doesn't matter. Also has a win that he didn't finish as well. But he's 18-2 as a starter, whereas Marcus Mariota was a sparkling 36-5 over 3 years of starting at Oregon. So you finally wrap this tail of the tape up with national titles. Did either of these guys get it done at the collegiate level? Both of them played in a national championship game. Marcus Mariota not getting it done versus Ohio State in his final collegiate game, whereas Deshaun Watson wasn't able to get it done versus Alabama last season, but has a chance to right that wrong this season in 2016. So we'll see if he's able to do that. But looking at these two quarterbacks and looking at Deshaun Watson, I say to myself, I've always had a problem with Marcus Mariota. I felt like he was a front runner at Oregon. They were always up. They were always up big. I never felt like he had a lot of pressure on him, whereas Deshaun Watson, they're not blowing a lot of teams out per se. And you look at the conferences that these two players played in respectively. With Watson, he plays in the ACC. It's okay. It's not the toughest conference, whereas the Pac-12, I'd actually give the nod to Mariota. I think that the level of talent there is a little bit bigger and better, but not by much because, these conferences have gotten so big that you got to split them in half. And not to say that Marcus Mariota and that Pac-12 conference is all that great. When you're playing Washington State and those teams, Oregon State and those teams, and not playing the UCLAs of the world and those guys, you kind of get in the pass, which is what Mariota was able to do at Oregon at certain points. Whereas with Watson, you're seeing Florida State, you're seeing North Carolina if you get to the ACC championship. So you could argue that even though the conference that Mariota played in was a little bit stronger, I still think Deshaun Watson has seen a very tough level of competition. And I take it a step further. At Clemson, you almost are guaranteed to play at least one tough out-of-conference game, whether it's traveling to Louisville a couple years ago or, this year. And I want to say they traveled to Louisville 2 years ago. I'm not sure. But, or you're playing Notre Dame at home last year. Those are tough games. You got to play Florida State. That's a tough game every year. So there's some tough games on the schedule for Clemson. It just seems like each and every single year they've got some tough games. As does Oregon. They got to play Stanford every year, and that was always tough. That was always the game that you look to the schedule and say, if they're going to lose, that's going to be the one that's going to trip them up. So my biggest thing is there's been adversity at Clemson for Deshaun Watson. There's been tough throws. There's been stick throws. There's been some pinpoint accurate throws down the field, which I always question with Marcus Mariota. Can you make those throws down the field with pinpoint accuracy, with defenders draped all over? Because it seemed like he was always throwing into wide open windows. Not to say that Deshaun Watson isn't throwing into wide open windows, but we've seen him thread the needle. I just always felt like it came easy. And maybe Marcus Mariota was a product of his environment. It just looked easy because it was easy because they were just so much better than everyone else. They made it look easy, and it wasn't as easy as it looked. But it just always seemed like everything came easy to him, whereas with Deshaun Watson, it's a little tougher, and he's making some tougher throws and tougher decisions and making the right ones. And I don't know. It's just something about Deshaun Watson that I feel like he's a better prospect to me. But I will say this, Marcus Mariota stayed healthy his entire collegiate career. Deshaun Watson has not. This year is going to be huge in telling if this guy's injury prone or not, because his freshman season wasn't a great season in terms of staying healthy. Last year was great, didn't miss any games. Can he duplicate that in his junior season and solidify his spot potentially as the number one overall draft pick in the 2017 NFL draft if he should decide to come out? Tell me what you think. Is Deshaun Watson a better prospect right now than Marcus Mariota was going into the 2015 NFL draft? Again, there's still an entire collegiate season ahead of Deshaun Watson. This whole narrative could change with one season, but I'm talking about right now after seeing this guy last season do what he did. Is he a better prospect? Does he have the tools necessary? More so than Marcus Mariota did heading into the 2015 NFL Draft. That's going to do it for the College Football Series. I am your man, Louie T. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. Come back and join me as you continue to break down anything. And that's it in the National Football League. I'm coming back with some NFL topics, man. We're going to flip the script and go back to the NFL. See you next time. There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter at In the Lab Room, or you can like the Facebook page at In the Lab Room. That's In the Lab Room on Facebook and at In the Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.